12 Minutes by Robo KY. In the fall of 1987, local news channel WSB-TV2 of Atlanta, Georgia was trying to fill a scheduling gap in their Sunday morning lineup. After quite a few solicitations by local business owners, they decided to allow the young Reverend Marley Satch to take an available hour block to do a religiously themed show. It premiered on October 18th with very little promotion. The show was your standard religious fare and consisted of the Reverend sitting in a simple chair reading passages from the Bible to the camera and discussing their interpretation and significance to our modern day-to-day life. The show received a reasonable number of viewers and continued on into early December. It was then that the studio began to receive some very weird complaints of the viewers of her show, Words of Light with Reverend Mary Sachs. The calls were all women, and only women, who vaguely referred to feeling uncomfortable, feelings that they had at very specific intervals during the program. They described feelings of nausea, back pain, dizziness, blurred vision, and all sorts of things like that. These callers, and for no discernible reason, were absolutely convinced that it was the viewing of this program that was causing all of these symptoms. It was later determined that, after about 3 weeks of complaining, that these feelings were happening at roughly 12-minute intervals during the program. The studio staff checked on all of the recording equipment, both audio and video, and they found nothing faulty. When the Reverend was made aware of these incidents, he merely shrugged and stated, rather cryptically, that some people just can't handle the voice of God. The head of the studio, at a loss to explain the cause of these complaints, just decided to continue running the program. By February, the viewership had declined so sharply that it was decided that it was time to pull the plug on the show. The studio had figured that it would be more prudent to spend as much time as possible on the news story that the other two local news networks were abuzz about, the miscarriage epidemic. Starting in sometime in November, the number of healthy pregnant women miscarrying in the Atlanta metropolitan area had reached over 300. The CDC could find no discernible cause for this terrifying occurrence. The Reverend took the show's cancellation with what could only be described as abject indifference. When informed, he made no protest. He merely nodded, almost knowingly. He left the studio after the last episode was filmed, without so much as a word, and he completely dropped off of the face of the earth. No one, and I mean no one, has heard from him since, not even his former congregation or any member of the church. The studio moved on, filling the slot with infomercials and continued to concentrate on the miscarriage story. A year and a half later, an intern at the WSB studio discovered all of the tapes of Words of Light and began going through them in an attempt to stock footage for an upcoming piece that the station was doing on the impact of religion on the city. The Atlanta incident, as the miscarriage epidemic became known in many medical journals, petered out about 3 months after the cancellation of the show, and it had already begun to fade from the public consciousness. As the intern went through the tapes, he made a disturbing discovery in the footage. While attempting to stop one of the recordings at 10 minutes and 45 seconds, he mistakenly jammed the fast-forward button down. While the footage whizzed by, he attempted to prop up the button with the screwdriver. Just as he succeeded, the tape stopped at 32 minutes and 1 second. The intern fell out of his chair when he saw what was on the screen. An image of a badly decomposed severing head filled up the entire frame. He collected himself and moved back a couple of frames, and then forward a couple of frames. Then he finally realized that it wasn't his mind playing tricks on him. He began to go through the rest of the recording, and he soon discovered that at exactly 12 minutes, every 12 minutes, the image would appear on frame. Thinking that it was some kind of practical joke being played on the new guy, he presented it to one of the film technicians, ready to be mocked. The technician was just as puzzled as he was. No one had touched the footage since the cancellation of the show. After the studio had closed for the night, the intern convinced the tech to help him go through every single tape of Words of Light. They discovered that every single episode of every single tape had the same exact anomaly. What they also realized was that as the show progressed, the image became more and more, disgusting. Maggots slowly began to eat away at the loose flesh and pieces of hair, and the skin seemed to have fallen off exponentially. The tech made it clear to the intern that what they were seeing was technically impossible, since the film itself showed absolutely no signs of splicing, and that he himself had been at every filming of the show and knew that at no time could this image have been inserted into a frame. All of this was put together and then presented to the studio head, who, fearing some kind of backlash over allowing this on the air, ordered that all of the tapes were to be destroyed. He told both the intern and the tech that he had no interest in knowing who did it, only that, quote, covering their collective asses is all that's important now, end quote. He demanded that they mention this to no one. The tech moved on easily, remembering the incident as a darkly funny personal anecdote, but the intern, he wouldn't let it go. He made as many copies of the tapes as he could before they got wiped, and took them to see if he could find anything else in them that might point them at who did this or why they would. A week later, he attempted to rope the tech into helping him again, saying that he believed he had made a discovery, something even more disturbing than the images themselves. When the single frames were edited together in chronological order, the head's mouth appeared to be moving, as if it were trying to form words. The tech, fearing for his job, told him to get rid of the copies and to never, ever talk to him about it again. About a week later, police responded to a 911 call made by an elderly woman in one of Atlanta's suburbs at around dusk. She heard a horrible noise coming from her neighbor's house next door, where a young couple lived. She told the emergency responder that the wife was pregnant and was terrified that something had happened. When the officers arrived on the scene about 20 minutes later, they found no lights on in the windows and the front door was slightly ajar. They moved in slowly and made their way into the living room. Inside, they found the body of a dead woman, her abdomen slashed open. The wound was jagged, and a trail of blood led from the body over to the couch by the far end of the room. There sat her husband, the studio intern, completely naked, and the corpse of his own unborn child at his feet, dying. In his hand, he held a rusty piece of metal siding, which was the item he used to gut his pregnant wife. The television was on, playing an 18-second loop of silent footage of a decomposing head mouthing some unintelligible words. The story at the police precinct, to this day, kept saying under his breath over and over and over again as they led him away, "The light of God calls them. The light of God calls them. The light of God calls them. The light of God." Guys, I hope you enjoyed the story. A little bit more fucked up than we're used to, but that's okay. I think we can handle it. Let's take this moment to thank all of the lovely and amazing patrons listed on screen right now. Dan R., Paul Z., Cody V., Chaos X, Mr. Swiston, Official Jerboa, JY Pyromancer, Hayden MH, Ethan A., Dark Side of the Bear, Daniel H., and Maximilian Charles P. And to all of the D-Class personnel and Object Class Safe, you guys are amazing. I love you so much, and you make this all possible. Thank you. And if you are many of the people out there who has a little bit of money in their pocket just burning a hole going, damn, I wish I could support some amazing, young, handsome, good at sex creator, head on over to patreon.com/CreepSin. It is linked in the description. Thanks.